What's going on here? I'm getting some kind of feedback. Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome Mr. Zimmer, who's joining our committee today for clause by clause of CS5. And we have with us again Mr. Caro, Ms. Farquharson, and Madame Gonsalves. Is Mr. Moffat joining us today? No? Okay. So, I'm just going to take a minute to situate myself. We were at, I believe, G12, and it had been tabled, so it's on the floor, and so I guess we're opening the discussion on it. That's right, we're opening the discussion on it. Would anyone like to speak to G12? Is Ms. Collins here? Maybe. Oh, she's on screen. Okay, good. Your hand up, Ms. Collins?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just, in our last meeting, I had proposed a sub-amendment. And after speaking to members of the committee, I don't have support for the sub-amendment. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to move it. And yeah, I can speak more maybe after other members of the committee speak.
So, who would like to speak with someone? Anyone like to speak to this amendment? Yes, Mr. Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose a sub-amendment to this amendment. Currently, the amendment says 68.1, subsection 1, the ministers, to the extent practicable, shall use scientifically justified alternative methods and strategies to replace, reduce, and refine the use of vertebrate animals in the generation of data and conduct of investigations under 68A. Subsection 2, for the purposes of subsection 1, methods and strategies to refine the use of vertebrate animals. And here I want to strike shall and add includes minimizing. And then from there it continues pain and distress caused by vertebrate animals in the generation of data and conduct under of investigations under 68.
Can you send it in writing to
Sure.
to the clerk? It can't be distributed to everyone because it's not bilingual as far as I know.
Okay.
But the clerks would like to see a written version.
Gladly.
So I guess you send it to Alex, and in the meantime, after you've done that, of course, we can open discussion on the sub-amendment. I seem to have lost Madame Posey's amendments. What the hell? Pardon? Okay, Ms. Collins, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I appreciate the intent. I mean, I appreciate the intent of this motion in general. I think the addition is valuable, and I think the addition of the sub-amendment is also valuable. I'll be voting in favor of the sub-amendment, but in the end, in voting against the amendment as amended or not as amended, just because it is deleting an important section about what the minister shall not do, and really taking out some of the checkpoints and the requirements to answer this question each time. But I do really appreciate the additions that are being added here, and appreciate the work of both Ms. Taylor-Roy and Mr. Wheeler.
Yes, Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Yes, I just want to comment on that. I did meet with the some of the animal rights groups, Animal Justice and Dr. Chandrasekhar after the last meeting to discuss this, and they're satisfied with this. It has the positive intent of advocating for increased use of non-animal testing to support that kind of research and development in that area. And on the sub-amendment that Mr. Weiler has just made, it also addressed the issue of refine, which some people wanted removed, some wanted included in, but just tried to tailor that to actually specify that it was only talking about basically reducing pain when it came to the refinements. So I do think this amendment is very much supported by the animal rights activists, and I would hope that people will support this as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Couric.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the sub-amendment was read into the record and there was talk about it being sent, so I'm just wondering if we can have the exact wording read again, just so that we can... Thank you.
Would it be... Oh, you don't have it yet. So it's been sent, has it been... Oh, it's been sent directly to okay. But it went to the clerk then too? Okay, we'll get it to you in a second. Yes, we will. That's a good idea. And but absolutely, yeah. And as we wait for the written text to arrive, does anyone else want to speak to it? Yes, Madame Posey.
If Mr. Weiler could read it again, because the text will not be provided in French. No, it's bilingual. So we could read it in French. We will distribute it to all members. Do you have the emails? We will send it to you in both official languages.
P9, oui. Est-ce que l'amendement a été reçu par courriel?
Was the amendment received? Not yet.
Monsieur le Président, je poserai une question.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question to the mover of the amendment. There's the restrictions. I was wondering why you're also asking to eliminate the exceptions. So I'm trying to read the exceptions and place them in context with the amendment, and I think it could work. It's an addition, isn't it? No, it says substitution. So it eliminates all of the exceptions. Are you talking about the amendment or the sub-amendment? Well, no, I'm speaking to the amendment because I haven't received the sub-amendment yet. But right now we're talking about the sub-amendment. You should have received the wording of the sub-amendment by email. Has everyone received it? Can you explain it? Had you already done it, Ms. Taylor-Roy? Or can you explain the amendment?
The original amendment that I put forward was to replace what was there with a positive obligation on the minister to look for alternatives to animal testing. Laura Collins had suggested going back to the other one, but she withdrew that sub-amendment. The other sub-amendment I put forward was from animal rights groups I'd spoken to who had asked for clarification on the word refine. So I was going back to my original amendment, which now is not being amended by Ms. Collins, and trying to add a small section that just talks about the concept of refine to ensure that we're talking about reducing distress for the animals. So that's where it is right now.
So before we didn't really know what refine meant. It was too large a term, could have meant anything. And now we're narrowing the meaning of refine. Anyone else before we vote on the sub-amendment? No, I guess we can vote on the sub-amendment.
So it's just moving shall. Like that's.
Well, it's adding a section, it's adding a section to define what refining means.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
Sorry.
it couldn't.
Sorry.
Previously, it was a bit too broad, and yes, Ms. Collins.
Thoughts?
Ms. Collins, your screen is frozen, unfortunately. Maybe if you take the, I guess we have to keep the video on. Is that? It's sorry, oh, there we go. Okay, good. You're back live.
Oh. Okay. It looks like maybe my connection is unstable. And so hopefully you can hear me. Just wanted to reiterate my appreciation for this amendment. I do think it's valuable, clarifying what the word refine means, and especially limiting it to minimizing pain. I think that, I just commend Ms. Taylor-Roy for her work on this. And I was just wondering if we do have kind of a general consensus around the table to move forward with the sub-amendment, if we could do it by unanimous consent.
Is there unanimous consent for the amendment? Sub-amendment, sorry, sub-amendment. Looks like there is. Okay. Okay, so the sub-amendment is adopted, and now we continue to debate, if necessary, the amendment. I think, Madame Posé, vous vouliez...
Ms. Posey, you had a question on the amendment? Yes, indeed. I was wondering why the amendment asks to substitute all the way to line 25 in French or 21 in English, where it says restrictions, it could be applied even with the amendment.
Vous pensez que...
You think the amendment does not need to remove the exceptions? I can't really answer for you. I can't answer you, but maybe someone else could tell us more about this?
Go ahead.
Yes. Part of the reasoning was the original list that's in there. When you look at exceptions that are there, they're so broad that it was really just more illustrating. I mean, I felt that putting in a positive obligation was more effective or more would help more with advancing the field than listing this, because when you look under the exceptions under that list that were part of the original amendment from the Senate, it has, they do not apply if it's not reasonably possible. And that terminology, reasonably possible, was not supported by the animal rights groups. Reasonably possible was seen as too broad an exception, basically, to actually give this any teeth. So the whole of that 6811 that was under there, Part 2 rather, was seen as very, they preferred the positive obligation with the language that I put forward. I suppose that's the best way to say it.
Donc c'est pour renforcer.
The idea is to make it stronger.
Okay. Sorry, Ms. Collins?
I just, in kind of response to some of that, you'll see NDP 15 is the next motion. It won't be movable if this one passes, because I did want to change that language of not reasonably possible to obtain the data. I agree that it's not strong enough, and so had changed it to a really similar language to what Ms. Taylor-Roy has changed it to, but without deleting the stronger Senate amendments, which really, even though I appreciate the addition of a positive requirement on the minister, the requirement around what the minister shall not do, we heard in the testimony from the officials, has an administrative requirement. It's a requirement to answer this question each time, and it creates a checkpoint. And I think that is a valuable thing. The reason the Senate put this in was so that it would have a stronger checkpoint requirement to answer the question each time. And so just to Monique Madame José's question. I think it does delete something significant here. It also adds something positive, but in my mind, I can't support the deletion.
Anyone else? Should we go to a vote on G12?
Question of clarification. So if the amendment that I put forward that has been sub-amended by Mr. Weiler, if it's voted down, what happens to the next?
NDP 15?
Yeah.
If G12 is adopted, NDP 15 cannot be introduced.
Okay. If this is adopted. But if this is, if this
is negative, then NDP 15 can be.
Okay, but then if NDP 15 is not adopted, then we're left with the original language, which has that clause in it that says reasonably possible.
Yes, I believe so.
So that's one of the things to consider, is that I think that removing that language is very important for the groups, so that if we, so I would urge those who are in favor of this to vote for this amendment, because I think it addresses the concerns, and we want to have what was in the Senate language amended in the end to make it stronger.
Okay, so let's vote. Oh, sorry, Ms. Collins.
Oh, no, I was just going to say,
okay.
I think, Ms. Taylor-Roy, that I think there's motion, and there would be support for the next one too. I was just going to encourage us to vote.
Okay, so let's go with the voting. No, the sub-amendment's been adopted. G12 as amended. G12 as amended.
Mr. Duguid.
In favor.
Mr. Longfield.
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
In favor.
Ms. Thompson.
In favor.
Mr. Weiler.
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel.
En faveur.
Mr. Kirk.
In favor.
Mr. McLean.
En faveur.
Mr. Zimmer.
In favor.
Madame Posey.
Contre.
Ms. Collins.
Opposed.
Yeas pour 9-9, nays contre 2-2.
So G12 passes, and we now go to 16. Clause 16.1. Sorry, shall clause 16.1 carry as amended? On division. Okay, good, okay. As amended, okay. Shall clause 17 carry? On division? Yeah, okay. Then we go to clause 18, and we have PV 14, which is deemed moved. Ms. May, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment in order to direct the minister to require testing by industry where the available information is inadequate to determine if the substance is toxic. This is this amendment is also consistent with concerns that were raised when the Senate studied S5 before it came over to this side of to this place. So the concerns raised by the Senate Standing Committee on Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources are resolved through this amendment. This makes testing mandatory where available information is inadequate, and it's quite straightforward language. So I'll just leave it there, Mr. Chair, to say it's well supported from Canadian Environmental Law Association, and as I mentioned, also by the study the Senate committee did.
Would anyone like to speak to Ms. Collins?
Yeah, just to say thank you to Ms. May for putting this forward. I think mandatory testing is important, and I'll be supporting the motion.
Anyone else? No? Okay, so we'll go to a vote. So we're voting on clause 18. Sorry, we're voting on the amendment. Go ahead.
Mr. Duguid.
Opposed, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson.
Oppose.
Mr. Weiler.
Contre.
Monsieur Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk,
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean,
Opposed.
Mr. Zimmer, Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2, nays contre 9, neuf.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated, and now we'll vote on Clause 18. We'll do a roll call vote unless, is there, on division? Everyone's okay with on division? Okay, so Clause 18 passes on division, and we go to Clause, excuse me, Clause 19, and we have to start NDP 16. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a very similar motion trying to get at the same issue of mandatory testing, so I won't take too much time with it. Yeah, thanks.
So, we'll vote on anyone else? Would anyone else like to speak to this? Okay, let's do a vote.
Mr. Duguid,
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield,
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson,
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler,
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel,
Contre.
Mr. Kirk,
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean,
Contre.
Mr. Zimmer,
Opposed.
Madame Posey, Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2, nays contre 9, neuf.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated, and we move on to PV 15, which is deemed moved. Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reviewing the clause-by-clause amendments preparing for the committee, my staff and I realized that there had been an error in transcribing from one set of documents to another, and inadvertently, it lacks the sense that it needs. Now, as you'll recall, under the motion this committee passed, I'm required to be here on a short timeline to get amendments in. Can't fix them afterwards. So I will, at this point, let the committee know that thanks to generosity of the member from Victoria, Laurel Collins, we've been working it out, and she has an amendment prepared. So I'm going to turn it to her because as it now stands, this PV 15 isn't ready to be voted on, but if Ms. Collins is prepared to put forward a solution, I would welcome it.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Collins, your solution would not be NDP 17, would it?
No, it's a sub-amendment to PV 15. And so...
Okay, just a moment, please. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have it in writing, or?
I do, and I've sent it to the clerk.
Okay, the
It
clerk
should
has
be
it in
their
both
email.
languages? Okay, so we'll distribute that. Thank you. We'll come right back to you, Jen.
Wonderful. Yeah, and just to be clear, Mr. Chair, I will be proposing NDP 17. This is a completely different sub-amendment for PV 15.
So right now, you're proposing something before you propose NDP 17,
Exactly.
and it's been distributed more or less. It's about to be distributed. Has it gone out? Yeah, okay. So we can,
And just-
would you like to
Just
speak?
so folks kind of know what is being added here, it's really the same text that you see on your page with simply the addition of section A, and the part that you have on your page will become section B. And so A would say, the addition would be A by replacing lines 14 and 15 on page 15 with the following, quote, 72. Despite subsection 71, bracket 1, the minister must exercise the powers under that subsection in relation to a substance, comma, a product that. And I will pass it back to, and if with the chair's permission, back to Ms. May to speak to her full amendment.
Go ahead, Ms. May, briefly. Yeah.
Just making sure everybody has
Just a
received.
point of order.
Yes. Mr.
Chair,
Longfield.
Don't we have to vote on a sub-amendment first?
Perhaps, Mr. Chair, could I suggest that we have unanimous consent out of consideration and to sub-amend this to what it was originally intended?
So this is a sub-amendment. You're not, it's not that Ms. May is not presenting PV 15,
No,
and you're
I'm not trying
presenting.
to in any way change Ms. May's intended amendment. She had intended to have originally submit this amendment. There was a transcription problem, and so her amendment was missing the first half of what she had intended
Okay,
to
so
submit.
so you're
And
basically you're presenting a whole new amendment.
I'm presenting a sub-amendment to her.
Okay,
amendment
sub-amendment.
to
Okay.
return it to the original intention.
Okay, so a sub-amendment to PV 15, so yes, we have to vote on the sub-amendment.
And Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me, I do hope that just out of generosity and in the spirit of good working together, even if members don't support the amendment itself, that they will allow it to be at least fixed for the record on what it should have been.
Okay, so is there a reason, do we need to discuss the sub-amendment? Yes, Ms. May?
No, I know I'm under the rules that are, as you know, I find really it unfortunate that my rights are restricted in this way when I could normally have fixed this on the floor of the House at report stage if this committee hadn't passed the amendment, the motion that restricts my rights. I know that under the rules you've passed, I'm not allowed to speak to another member's sub-amendment, nor am I allowed to amend my own motion. That's why we're here. That's why the sub-amendment from Ms. Collins fixes something in PV 15 that needs fixing.
Okay,
And it's a very straightforward measure. It just is to say, despite subsection 71, the minister must exercise the powers under that subsection in relation to a substance and a product that, and then it replaces as it continues here. This is, again, about ensuring that we have adequate testing of toxic substances. That's the framework of PV 15, and we did have a glitch in the way it was drafted.
Okay,
so I hope that's all
but
makes sense now.
Ms. Collins is rectifying the glitch. Yeah, okay. Mr. Couric.
I would suggest that there's, looking around the table, unanimous consent to see the sub-amendment adopted.
Is there unanimous consent? Yes, looks like there is. Okay, so now we go.
And I think, in the interest of time, and I thank, thanks, Damien, and all members of the committee, in the interest of time, again, this is, I've described it, it's now fixed, it's before you in its proper form, and I'd urge you, although my previous efforts and Laurel's previous efforts to make sure testing is mandatory and more complete, this is just basically a continuation of the framework of amendments put forward by the Green Party to make testing mandatory where existing information is insufficient.
Does anyone else want to speak to PV 15, or can we go to a vote? We can go to a vote?
So sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Just a question to the officials. This was, there were some concerns raised in testimony about the administrative burdens of a few things. So I'm just wondering if the officials could give us some feedback on this amendment, amended amendment, and whether or not it's solving something that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Would Ms. Farquharson be? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sure, I can start. So the right now, if there's information missing to assess a substance, the departments use various tools. They might, if they have information gaps, they might do the testing themselves. They might do monitoring and partnering with academia, or they might leverage data from other jurisdictions. And they use the powers in this section to gather information and gather what they need. And the test, so I guess that's the answer is it's not clear that there is anything broken here. And I think making it mandatory, it might make, then you're creating a situation like you're asking for, it's not necessary. I guess that's what I'd say. And I can ask there's two people from the science side of things on this call too, so they might want to expand on that.
I can't see everybody who's on the screen, but do any of the other officials want to speak to this? Or? Yes, I can't, I'm having troubles. Is this Ms. Gonsalves who wants to speak to it? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just very briefly, and just to reiterate what Ms. Farquharson said, is that in any instance where we feel that there is data missing to help complete a risk assessment, there are many mechanisms that we can use, including requesting data from industry to complete those risk assessments. Thank you.
Anyone? Yes, Ms. May.
If I may, it's just that the department should not be troubled by an amendment that says if the information that is available is not sufficient. Their answer is, we'll always find a way to make sure the information available is sufficient. The amendment covers a circumstance that is plausible that the information available is not sufficient. And in other words, this poses no disruption to the department's response of how they'll always be able to find the information. They'll look at it themselves. They'll search out other researchers and academics.
Requires them to.
This is just to say, if you happen to find yourself in a situation where the information is not sufficient, it becomes mandatory.
Yeah, mandatory. Okay. So anyone else on this amendment? No? Shall we go to a vote?
Mr. Duguid. Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed?
Ms. Thompson.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel.
Opposed.
Mr. Curry.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Zimmer.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
Pour.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2, nays contre 9, 9.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated. We'll go now to...
Non, mais... Oh, excusez.
Oui.
Il faut, j'imagine...
Now we need to vote on Clause 19, but I have a small amendment to propose. It's a little tiny one. Okay, but PV 15 was defeated. You have an amendment for Clause 19? Yes. Line 29. It's simply to eliminate the word can or peut on the French version. So instead of could specify, so I would cancel that word and that it specifies the initiatives.
Okay, that's good.
Do we agree? It doesn't seem too complicated. Do we have unanimous consent to change the wording? Okay, so it's done.
C'est nous qui vous remercions.
Thanks to you.
17, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very straightforward amendment. It just adds the line and publish a plan with timelines. This is just a explicit requirement to ensure that there are timelines required when plans are, that there's a plan with timelines being published. So I think it's a straightforward amendment that I hope most people can support.
Comments? Any reaction to the tabling of this amendment? No? Shall we go to a vote? Alex, please.
Mr. Duguid.
Support, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield.
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
In favor?
Ms. Thompson.
In favor.
Mr. Weiler.
In favor.
Mr. Deltel.
Pour.
Mr. Currick.
For.
Mr. McLean.
In favor.
Mr. Zimmer.
In favor.
Madame Posey.
Pour.
And Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 11, 11.
Congratulations, Ms. Collins. NDP 17 is carried. G13. Who would like to propose G13?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose G13. And again, it's referring to animal testing. So basically, the motion would just amend it by replacing lines 37 to 41 on page 15 with the development and timely incorporation of scientifically justified alternative methods and strategies in the testing and assessment of substances to replace, reduce, or refine the use of vertebrate animals. So it was just basically making it consistent with what we did earlier. That there's a requirement that the plan of chemicals management priorities address vertebrate animal testing as well. So the text of this amendment is not consistent with the language used in other provisions in the bill regarding vertebrate animal testing. So the 3 R's, the replace, reduce, or refine, we need to put in this section as well. So it's really just kind of making it consistent in the end to allow that to happen.
Thank you. Just for my own clarification, so I understand, and I think we've all shown support for the intent to see animal testing phased out where I think the word was practicable in the previous amendment. But just wondering about if I could get the words defined. Maybe Ms. Taylor-Roy or the officials or both. So the testing and assessment. I'm just curious as understanding the difference between those two things. Is it something to be that there's reason to define them as two separate things? So I'm just wondering, in the context of this amendment, what testing means and what assessment means.
But just the testing, obviously, for whether substances are toxic or not, or what the effect is, an assessment is in terms of the minimum quantities, and so it's assessing the quantities and doing more of a full assessment on them. So it's essentially the same thing, it's just expanding on it. But if one of the officials would like to add and clarify that, that's fine too.
Would any of the officials like to add to that? Or is it a good explanation? No, I don't see anyone wanting to add further. I'm sorry, Mr. Carreau wants to. Okay, I'm sorry. The screen blocks out some. Mr. Carreau.
Thank you very much. Indeed, just to build on what MP Taylor-Roy had indicated, assessing is looking at the toxicity of a chemical and its risk to health or the environment. There's also elements of validating new approaches and methodologies that would replace animal testing, and that is also the context in which testing comes into play. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else on G13 before we vote? No? Okay.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
I'm sorry. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this amendment, again, there are things about it that I like. I am worried that it's putting, I understand it's a bit of a housekeeping one where it's putting it in alignment with the approach used elsewhere, but I do have some concerns about that approach. And I think given my opposition to the last amendment, I see this, changing some of the amendments by the Senate that were really trying to strengthen some of these pieces of animal justice. So I will be opposing it, despite the addition of some valuable points.
Okay, thank you. Shall we go to a vote? Ms. Collins, your hand is still up there.
My apologies.
Mr. Duguid.
Support, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield.
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Support.
Ms. Thompson.
Support.
Mr. Weiler.
In favor.
Mr. Deltel.
Pour.
Mr. Kirk,
Support.
Mr. McLean,
En faveur.
Mr. Zimmer, Madame Posey,
Contre.
Ms. Collins.
Against.
Yeas pour 9-9, nays contre 2-2.
Alors, l'amendement G13 est
So the amendment, this brings us to BQ4, Ms. Posey. So we would be adding something after line 41, what follows. The plan shall include This plan shall include timeframes not exceeding 5 years for implementing the measures set out in the plan. So we're trying to set a timeline for implementation of the plan. That's all it is. I have nothing else to add. I don't want to let this drag on forever. Are there any comments, questions for Ms. Posey? We can move on to the vote.
Mr. Dogood,
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield,
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson,
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler,
Opposed.
Monsieur Deltel,
Contre.
Mr. Kirk,
Opposed.
Mr. McLean,
Contre.
Mr. Zimmer,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2-2, nays contre 9-9.
Alors, l'amendement est rejeté.
So the amendment is defeated. We're moving on to NDP 18. Ms. Collins.
It is a different section, but it has the same intention. You'll notice that it requires the minister to review the plan within 5 years after it's published and every 5 years after that.
Okay, any comments, questions? Can we go to a vote?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'd like to propose a sub-amendment, and I can read it out in its entirety.
Is it long? Is it something that,
It is long.
yeah, could you send it in writing to the clerk?
And, Mr. Chair, if we could just take a quick pause, would that be
Yeah,
all
sure,
right?
sure.
And members can partake of some of the food that I ordered on your behalf.
Which you ordered well, which you ordered.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mr.
so,
Chair. A short pause.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So, yes, we'll do that.
Relatively minor changes to the honourable member's amendment, and so I will highlight where the changes are. Plan priorities 73.1. The minister shall, within 2 years after the day on which this section receives royal assent, develop and publish a plan, adding the words including timelines. A, that specifies the substances to which the ministers are satisfied. Priority should be given in assessing whether they are toxic or capable of becoming toxic. That's underlined?
It's all the same as what's there. The only changes are in 73 where you're talking there. 73 is including
73.1.
timelines. 73.1, we're just adding
73.1,
including
we
timelines.
add the words including timelines.
And then it's all the same.
And then in
Until
73.2,
Right.
adding the words, I'll read the whole sentence, the plan shall also include the period after which the ministers will review the plan. Adding to that line, the period must be no longer than 8 years.
A written version was sent to.
There's also a change to the 73.1, the first sentence, including timelines.
We don't have it yet, no? Okay. We'll just wait for the written version. Je vais poser la question.
I'll ask the question once we get to that point. You can propose it. It's an important step, and I think everyone should be here. So you just have to propose that we end at 5:30. I think people will understand. Inaudible, the mic is not on. We have the sub-amendment in English only, but we can read it again. We will reread it, please. We only have it in English. The clerk only has it in English, so we can't distribute it. So we will read it again. Mr. Duguid, can you read your sub-amendment once more?
Mr. Chair, point of order, just the microphone.
Can you hear now?
73.1, the first line, the ministers shall, within 2 years after the day on which this section receives royal assent, develop and publish a plan. And then we add the words, including timelines. And then the last, in 73.2, that line will now read, the plan shall also include the period after which the ministers will review the plan. That period must be no longer than 8 years. The NDP amendment had suggested 5 years. We've changed that to 8.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, the sub-amendment, it changes from a proposed 5-year review, but also adds a timeline for when the plan has to be published. So effectively, you're adding you're clarifying how long the minister has to release the report, and then extending, making it effectively. Then it's 8 years after the report is released is then the new timeline being proposed in the sub-amendment.
That's my understanding. Unless
There's a bit of confusion. We're going to suspend for a minute. de bien comprendre ce qui se passe avec le sous.
Let's try to understand what's going on with the sub-amendment. Go ahead.
I'm going to try to explain what the government amendment and the NDP amendment do at the same time. And I would propose a different writing to those to read like this. Since it's a sub-amendment, so that the amendment be amended by A, adding the following on line 25, page 15, after the word a plan, the words including timelines. And then B, that Bill S5 be amended by adding on line 2, page 16, after the word plan, the following: that period must no longer must be no longer than 8 years. Sorry, and then C, by deleting paragraph A of the amendment, because that paragraph deletes lines 1 and 2, page 16, that the sub-amendment intends to amend. So you can't have it removed and amend afterwards. So if you remove that last part, which is paragraph A of the amendment, it will solve that problem, and it will also solve the problem of the amendment of Ms. Posey.
I didn't know there was a problem with the amendment of Ms. Posey. Okay, okay. Okay, so is that pretty clear then to everyone? Yeah, okay. So that's the sub-amendment. Okay. So, is there any debate on this sub-amendment?
Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Well, I had Ms. Collins and Mr. Longfield. Ms. Collins?
Well, maybe just to start, the additions to this will not impact future amendments. Just wanted to confirm.
The answer is no.
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. And so then I guess my comments are, of course, I would love to have my amendment stay as plan every 5 years. But that said, especially given the previous vote on Madame Posey's 5-year suggestion, my guess is that there may be support for 8 years and not for 5. And so I will be supporting the sub-amendment.
So, Mr. Longfield, Ms. Collins, if you could take your,
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. If the officials would mind just repeating one more time for me. I'm trying to follow along and want to make sure I've got it right, please.
You would like the officials to...
I'm sorry, the legislative clerks.
The legislative clerks to read it again. Please. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You need to be at page 15 of the bill, line 25, to start with. So it would read that Bill S5 be amended. Sorry, let me rephrase that. That the amendment be amended by A, adding the following on line 25, page 15, after the word a plan, the words including timelines. So that would be the first one, first changes. The second changes would be that the amendment be amended by the following, adding the following, that Bill S5 be amended by adding on line 2, page 16, after the word plan, the following. It would be that period must be no longer than 8 years. And then C, by deleting paragraph A of the amendment.
Does that clarify, Mr. Longfield?
Yes, I think I had that there was a comment that you were making that there was a technical reason that there was another change, or did I miss that we're back to the original sub-amendment?
If the clerks could perhaps explain the problem that we were trying to solve. I think that's the honourable member's
Jerry.
question.
Put it into Winnipeg language.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Posey had proposed an amendment earlier on page 15, line 29, that replaced the words in English may specify with the words specifies. So that was right in the middle of the amendment that was proposed by the government. So it would preclude the amendment from the government. So what I've basically redrafted the government amendment to split it in two and keep the middle as it was. So Ms. Posey's amendment would be integrated with it.
So it's consistent. Very
Yes.
good. Thank you.
Okay, so, yes, Ms. Taylor.
Sorry, can I have one other question? The amendment that was put forward by Ms. Collins had a Part B by adding after line a Part B and C. I'm assuming those are no longer in the amendment? They are?
Removed.
Well, because Part B says the minister shall review the plan within 5 years after it is published and every 5 years after that. And I thought that was what was being changed to the 8 years. So I'm not sure how that's consistent then if we have both of those things in there.
So that's
I'm a little confused.
just a look.
Yeah? See, I think the amendment that Ms. Collins put forward was changing it in a different way. She was just deleting lines 1 and 2 and adding a new section. What Mr. Duguid's sub-amendment did was to instead add the time frame onto line 2 on page 16, which would then negate the need for adding after line 30 on page 16 the following section 7.1.
Because the amendment proposed by the government doesn't address what's in the amendment. So it looks more like an amendment rather than a sub-amendment. So it would be probably easier to deal with the amendment, NDP 18 first. And if you wanted to propose your new amendment, as I explained it earlier, you would get rid of NDP 18 because that's what it seems to be happening anyway, and then propose this one that would incorporate the way I said it earlier as a new amendment.
Could I make another suggestion, which might be simpler since we have this one on the table, is that the sub-amendment change the amendment by, in point B, where it says by adding after line 30 on page 16 the following, 7.1, make that 8 years and after that 8 years. So just change the time in that section as opposed to making the change in point 2. But it's either way, but I just think that way we can at least work with this.
Monsieur Deltel?
If I may, our concern is about the timeline, 5 years to 8 years. We do agree with 8 years. We have big concern with 5 years.
Right. So I'm suggesting change the 5.
That's it. This is where we stand. So if I tell you the truth, I lost the track between all of those amendments,
Okay.
amendment and everything.
Okay, I hear you.
But if we keep it until you assure us that we keep the 8,
Then
we
you-
do agree.
Legislative clerk's the most efficient way to get what we want. And as soon as
Mr. Chair, while the clerks are deliberating here, I'm just going to ask for another short pause. We have it anyway with the clerks, so. Okay.
If you've got it sorted, let's move it. But
Yeah.
if not, we're comfortable standing down, but if they have it sorted out, that's good.
Mr. Chair, just because of the
We're not in session right now, so.
Oh, we're not. Okay.
Well, I'm going to let them try and sort something out.
Admit I'm not able to consult with our NDP colleague, and I did not go across the room to consult Madame Posé, but there does seem to be some agreement that there is some confusion, some complexity that we need to sort out. So I would move that we stand this clause down, and that requires unanimous consent, as you know, Mr. Chair.
To that. So, yes, so we have unanimous consent, I believe. Okay, so now we'll go to clause 20. Clause 20, CPC 14. Sorry?
CPC 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. CPC 4, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just before I move that. So parking, this clause would also see NDP 19 parked and
the whole train.
And NDP 20, so now we're on CPC 4. Okay. Forgive me while I open my my notes. So I'm moving CPC 4. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would move CPC 4, and one of the consistent items that we heard from testimony is that with the addition of this additional list is the need for industry, and including from some environmental groups, to ensure that there was not only a pathway for a substance to be on this watch list, but also to ensure that there would be a path, an off-ramp, so to speak, to ensure that if a substance after evaluation was deemed to either not be toxic or some sort of a further evaluation, based, of course, on the work that the department does and as outlined in the Act, to just ensure that there is that a substance wouldn't end up on this watch list because of a lack of information, and then the negative impacts that it would have if there was not the ability for it to be removed if the evidence, testing, etc., was to deem that it was in fact not toxic. So we, in working with drafting, hope to have found a reasonable ability for the minister to not only label something to add to the watch list, but also to see an off-ramp so that if the understanding of a certain substance changes, it could be addressed accordingly.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the intent of this amendment from my colleague across the way, and I would like to propose a sub-amendment to this motion. The inclusion of paragraph B would defeat the policy intent of the watch list. The watch list, as we know, is intended to be a list of non-toxic substances with hazardous properties to inform manufacturers, importers, and other stakeholders about substances that could be determined to be toxic if the volume of use or exposure were to increase. The establishment of a watch list would support the selection of safer alternatives by importers, manufacturers, and others. Therefore, I propose modifying the motion and deleting SS 3.1 from the motion. If that makes sense, Mr. Chair.
I had a bit of trouble following all this, but
The
you're
the last one, though, right?
Yes, Ms. Collins, do you have your hand up?
So, yeah, just did we have it in writing?
Well, so are you proposing a sub-amendment?
Yes.
Okay. But could you tell us what the sub-amendment is?
The sub-amendment is, if we go to 75.13.
Well, we're amending the amendment, so could you go to the amendment and tell us how you're amending the amendment?
It's just deleting 3.1, Mr. Chair. There's more?
Yeah. No, we need to. We have to. You have to show me where in CPC, what in CPC 4 we're changing.
It's
3.1. Take it out totally. Is that what you're saying?
And in yellow? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, Mr. Chair, so striking 3.1, but also if we go to 75.13, got it, Mr. Clerk? .13, we would add the word including to the first sentence. 75.13. I'm not sure. I have a.
On page 17.
Okay, 75.13.
There's deletion of item at the top.
Right. Okay, so
Add to the first sentence after that is specified on the list, including A, if an order is made under subsection 90, bracket 1, adding the substance to the list of toxic substances in Schedule 1, or B, if the minister no longer suspects that the substance is toxic or capable of becoming toxic. And if I would ask, I have colleagues who are monitoring this, if they could send that to you, Mr. Chair, and the clerks, and the rest of us.
Okay, so the first part is getting rid of 3.1 in the amendment. And, pardon? So we get rid of 3.1 for greater certainty, subsection 3 does not limit the authority, etc.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just because I'm not in the room and I can't completely tell what's happening, I'm just wondering if it would make sense to stand clause 21 as well and get the
Well, we're on 20 right now.
sub-amendment.
We're on 20.
Aren't we? Oh, I thought we stood clause 20.
We stood 19.
19, my apologies. Yeah, so I guess my recommendation would be maybe stand clause 20 as well, and that way we can move forward and get as much as we can done today and have the language sent to the committee so we can go over it.
Stand clause 20.
It does.
Yeah.
So,
C'est CPC4.
Pause for a moment, because I think, Chair, can we suspend for a moment? Is that? So I think the.
suggest seeking unanimous consent to stand this item down and
Okay,
to come back
is there
with
unanimous consent?
Language that is acceptable to
Yes,
all
there
parties.
seems to be. So we'll stand down clause 20 as well. Okay, now we go to clause, and I believe we did start a bit late, but my understanding is Madame Posé has to leave us at 5:30. So if everyone is all right with the stick. Okay, well, let's say 5:40. We'll continue to 5:40. Is everyone good with that? No?
No.
5:30? Okay, we're stopping at 5:30. So we have 9 minutes, and now we're on clause 21. PV 16. Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm in your hands on this. This amendment is premised on the continuation of the virtual elimination list, and I think it is possible to continue with this amendment, even though my efforts to retrieve the virtual eliminations list from being repealed, in that the term, if applicable, the virtual eliminations list. So that's the only part that actually is totally premised on the virtual elimination list. So that's a question, because I can't amend my own motions, right? So I've put forward this amendment. I think it hasn't been, as far as I know, the clerk hasn't determined that it can't be put forward because of the earlier rejection of my amendments to ensure that the virtual elimination list continue. As you'll recall the conversation, my amendment would have repaired the part of the virtual elimination list that the officials said was the problem, but the fact that I'd solved the problem didn't seem to disturb anybody's argument that it just should be gotten rid of even if it was fixed. I'm not certain at this point if this amendment will be considered in order, so I suppose I should check with the clerks. If it's in order, I would suggest that someone else other than me amend it, because I'm not allowed to amend my own motions. I hope that at some point someone watching all this will tell the Prime Minister's office to stop making committees pass this motion that demands that people in my position show up at committee and then try to work through all the sticky tape that occurs. But I look to you for guidance on this one, Mr. Chair.
So your question is whether your amendment PV 16 is in order. That's your first question. So apparently it is in order.
in which case the purpose of this amendment is to ensure that the minister add a substance to the list if it's determined to be toxic and the minister is satisfied that it's persistent and bioaccumulative, that it's present in the environment due to primarily as a result of human activity, that it is not a naturally occurring radionuclide, and that it poses an unacceptable risk in accordance with the regulations. So in that sense, it is in order and stands as yet another attempt to ensure that toxic chemicals and the treatment of toxic chemicals moves from a rather discretionary formula to one that requires action when these multiple aspects of its toxicity and threat to human health have been ascertained.
Okay, comments? Madame Posey?
Un rapide commentaire.
I have a quick comment, Mr. Chair. We can see that the Green Party's work has been to tighten up this act that is 20 years old and had required a lot of work. And I just want to say that I will vote in favor because it is for the health of people and of the environment as well. Are there any other comments before we move to a vote? Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think this amendment makes sense given that the other amendments on virtual elimination didn't pass currently. I won't try and sub-amendment because I don't think we have support for the amendment as a whole, but I will be voting in favor because I am in favor of the spirit of this motion.
Okay. Should we go to a vote? Looks like there's agreement that we do. Alex?
Mr. Duguid.
Opposed?
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed?
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson.
Oppose.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed?
Mr. Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Zimmer.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
Oui.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2 deux, nays contre 9-9.
Okay, we'll go to, so it's defeated. We'll go to NDP 25. I should mention that if NDP 25 is adopted, BQ7 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Ms. Collins, would you like to move NDP 25?
Yeah, so I do want to move NDP 25, and just to kind of for the folks, and especially Madame Posé's reassurance, BQ7, while longer, there is an NDP 26, which is kind of the second half of BQ7. My amendments, for some reason, were split in half, and Madame Posé's then are right between the two amendments that are really the NDP 25 and NDP 26. Together are pretty much the same as BQ7. And so the amendment itself is talking about timelines again, and it adds a requirement that within 1 year after publication of the statement referred in subsection 1. So it's really just creating kind of a 1-year timeline, ensuring that we have speedy processes. And yeah, apologies that this was split into 2 and that we have BQ7 in the middle.
Would anyone like to? I've got Mr. Duguid, Madame Posé, then Mr. Duguid.
Oui, écoutez, je...
Listen, I would like to suggest to my colleague something. It's that in BQ7, there is an interesting point. I mean, I think it's entirely interesting, but I would like to call your attention to point 8.1, and it's a matter of transparency. If the ministers extend the period for collecting the data or conducting investigations, they can provide notice that the extension. So they would justify the extension. So we don't have that in the other 2 amendments that we're discussing. The idea of justifying what they're doing. In NDP 25, I have a question. It says, after taking into consideration the comments filed under the subsection and within 1 year after the publication, the statement referred to in the subsection, should we be talking about the decision rather than speaking to the statement? That's my question. So you're proposing a sub-amendment to NDP 25, is that it? Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Ms. Collins?
Just that the section that Madame Posé would be adding would actually be adding to NDP 26. So you'll notice 8.1 comes after 8. So if you flip over to NDP 26, the sub-amendment would actually need to be added in that further amendment that would come after NDP 25. And so I'm just like I reading through 8.1 and having that extension of the period for collecting data and conducting investigations. I think this is a valuable addition, and I appreciate Madame Posé's work on it. And I'm very, very open to a friendly amendment to NDP 26, but it wouldn't be able to be added to NDP 25, which is the one we're addressing now, which only has to do with lines 7 and 8 on page 20.
Okay. Alors, Madame Posé.
So, Ms. Posey, if I understood correctly, Ms. Collins likes your idea, but she believes that it would be more fitting to amend NDP 26. Well, can I do it? Because earlier you said that if we vote on NDP 25, BQ7 falls. So I understand that I can take 8.1 and add it to NDP 26. Is that correct? That's what I understood, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. So will you then withdraw your sub-amendment on NDP 25? Yes, of course. Okay, so we are staying on NDP 25. Shall we move to a vote? Are there any comments?
I'm going to ask the...
Oh, I'm sorry, you did
yes,
have your
I did
hand
have
up
my
now.
hand up
Sorry,
earlier,
apologize.
Mr. Chair, and suggested Madame Posé be the first speaker. I see the clock is 5:30. I was going to ask our officials to comment on the sub-amendment and amendment. I think what I would ask, Mr. Chair, is that they come prepared to comment on that when we resume the next session next Monday.
And that we adjourn now.
I move adjournment, Mr. Chair.
Do I see any opposition to adjourning? No. Okay. We're adjourned. Have a nice weekend. We'll tackle this on Monday.